Hey, it's Jullian, and this is a chronological 10 movies that I like. Starting with number 1 in 1942 is Casablanca, which was directed by Michael Curtiz, has Humphrey Bogart, Claude Rains, and Ingrid Bergman, and one of my favorite films of all time. I could talk about it as time goes by, all the time. Very, very good movie, very good Hollywood movie. It's 80 years old today. Wow, or 80 years old this year, so big deal. They have a 4K restoration, kind of excited. Mechanic from 1972, very different movie going on 30 years into the future from that, is Charles Bronson as a hitman. One of the best Charles Bronson movies that's not associated with Death Wish or just him when he was still really trying to establish himself as a serious actor. I think this is one of his better top tier movies. One of my favorite elements of this movie is the fact that he is obsessed with the Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch, one of my favorite paintings as well. But I found it very interesting that has to be they draw a lot of focus to that. I don't think they did that in the Jason Statham movie, so that was a missed opportunity that I felt. The Taking of Pelham, 1974, which is a wonderful movie with Walter Matthau and Robert Shaw as the bad guy. You might remember him from The Sting, or you can also remember him from Jaws as Quint. He gives a wonderful performance, and the remake was not that great in comparison, but I think it's not a bad movie. It's just if you're comparing the two. This movie also was made for a television film with Edward James Olmos in the 90s. I have not seen that version, but really good story, good movie. I just love a lot of the 70s cinematography. It's just something about 70s cinema in New York. It just always is fun to look at. Number 4 is Escape from New York in 1981, directed by John Carpenter with his go-to guy, Kurt Russell. We have Adrienne Barbeau, Harry Dean Stanton, Ernest Borgnine, and it's a lot of fun. It's that high fantasy movie of telling the future, of walling off New York City and basically throw all the criminals in there. If you're a fan of the Batman video games, they did this in Arkham City by walling off parts of Gotham City and just locking people in there. So it's a very influential movie. Also, Snake Plissken is a very big influence on Solid Snake from the Metal Gear franchise. So this movie has a very big influence, but it didn't really cost that much, and it was a low budget movie. But John Carpenter was very good at very good. Legend, 1985, directed by Ridley Scott, starring Tom Cruise, Tim Curry, and Mia Sara, has that high fantasy element of films that I don't think they could ever really recreate, or they haven't successfully recreated. I think they have too much emphasis on CGI. This was all done practically, which I'm a huge fan of, especially since it was built mostly on the 007 stage. That is, until the set burned down. And Ridley Scott famously went to play tennis afterwards, and when the head of Universal called to ask where he was, and they was told that, he's like, yep, it's not a bad idea. So Legend, really good movie. There's 2 versions, a director's cut and a theatrical version. I would highly recommend watching the director's cut first and then watching the theatrical version to see the very jarring differences of what the director intended, but then put out. But it was also his decision. It wasn't a creative decision that was taken away from him. He wanted the movie to sell, so there was actually 3 different cuts, but for the most part, in the US, you'd only be available to get 2 cuts, and then there's a European cut, which is kind of a hybrid. They Live from 1988 also has John Carpenter with Roddy Piper and, of course, Keith David, which I think is probably it's one of those movies that hits home really closely the more you look at it in terms of today's context. Very deep, it has its humor in it, and yeah, you know. I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum. Sorry, I just had to. Number 7 is Groundhog Day, which is one of the best comedies of all time. Harold Ramis directed, and Bill Murray gives a fantastic performance, which is so layered. I actually wrote I think I did like my final project in my cinema class on Groundhog Day. seen it so many times, and I came up with a theory of Phil going into the time warp after encountering 3 sixes. So there's a lot of religious elements to it, but that was one of the reads I had. It was very interesting, but he encounters 3 sixes before he gets into the time loop. That was my running theory. Number 8 is Ocean's 11 from 2001, which just shows you that a remake can be better than the original, despite there being a lot. This one is directed by Steven Soderbergh with a very loaded cast, is far superior than the original with Frank Sinatra and his Rat Pack. It's a better movie altogether, but there's not saying that the original should be eradicated, it's just a different type of movie. This is much more of a fun heist movie. Number 9, Bad Santa from 2003. I'm going to say of the 3 cuts, I'm one of the few people that will say I enjoy the director's cut. You look this up anywhere online, everyone will say Badder Santa is the best version. I am in the camp that thinks the director's cut, which is the shortest version, also the darkest version, which if you're a fan of Terry Zwigoff, which is what drew me to the movie at some point, drew me back to the movie. I was seeing the director's cut and I was like, oh wow, I get it. But Badder Santa kind of went more for the laughs, I guess, for the movie, where this movie is a really, really dark movie with a comedic undertone. It's like, but I guess people miss that. And of course, number 10, Grand Budapest Hotel from 2010, which is one of the best, if not the best, Wes Anderson films, and just fun all around, just because of Ralph Fiennes giving a just amazing performance along with everyone else in the movie, and just telling a very great story in only the way that film can. So I highly recommend all of these films. So thank you so much for your time.